out an ignition switch on a Softail. You should have a set of instructions that come with it to show you the wiring diagram, but you should always have a service manual with you also. And a well-worn service manual is hopefully like a well-worn Bible, well used, hopefully just not mistreated. But anyway, I'm going to bring you in a little closer and I will show you how to change out that ignition switch. Okay, to get started, you might think the first step is to disconnect the battery. Actually, the first step is make sure you have the correct part for the job that you're doing, the correct model of car, motorcycle, whatever product you're working on. I know I have the correct part. The next thing is look over the instructions that came with that part. Make sure you understand it. If it's electrical, make sure you understand where all the wiring goes. Make sure that the chart is pretty well self-explanatory, that you understand how everything goes back together. Again, maybe consult a good service manual if need be, and that could help you out quite a bit. There could be some information that is left off these very bleak instructions sometimes. There's sometimes very little information or just the basics. So anyway, let's take a look at it. And before we tear into it too far, once we get into the ignition switch, we're going to look at the setup also. Again, looking at our diagram and making sure we understand what we're doing before we tear into it. Worst thing is to tear into something not knowing what you're doing and actually causing more damage or more money to yourself. But this is actually a pretty simple procedure. But anyway, let's look at taking the battery out next. Okay, I've taken a few liberties here. For one, I've already unbolted the seat. Okay, I've already disconnected the battery cables. Okay, I've disconnected the negative cable first and then the positive. Usually a 10mm wrench is what that takes. And you could pull these out of the way and work on the electrical part that you're working on. Myself, it's just as easy. Yep, just as easy to go ahead and pull the battery out and get it out of your way. That way, as tight as this is, you don't take a chance of something crossing it. Hopefully it's not too windy out here, guys. Of course it wasn't windy when I started, but hopefully that if it's just setting in here, even without the battery bolts, you can still make contact, and you don't want to do that while working on an electrical part, nor do you want the motorcycle to start while you're working on it. Okay, we've disconnected that. Let's look at the ignition now. Okay, at this point, as we again lay out the instructions and we look at our part that we're working on, we're looking at the wiring, reread it, make sure we understand what we're doing, understand any procedures that need to be followed in any certain order. Of course there isn't on this. The main thing is getting the right wires back into the right terminal. The only difference is on this terminal here, and which terminals are those? That is the B and C terminals. There's a little yellow wire, and on that one, that allows, I'm going to actually read their wording here. It said, wiring note, the yellow jumper wire between terminals B and C allow the lights to be on in the lights or ignition position. If you prefer not to have the lights on in the ignition position, remove the jumper wire. Okay, that is the only wire that can be optional, if you will. You have a red jumper here and a tan jumper here. Both of those need to be on. The ignition switch will not work without those, so those have to be connected. Again, the yellow is optional, depending on how you want your lights to run as far as with the ignition. Starting with the jumper, I'm just connecting that one first. see the jumper's connected to the yellow. Like I said, that's an optional. Okay, this green jumper, same as the red, are not connected as the yellow. Those you do not want to lose. Okay, now we have everything disconnected, and the only thing left are 4 screws holding the ignition switch itself. You can buy the parts to rebuild this ignition switch yourself. You can buy the plate and stuff and the roller. I'd prefer just to buy the whole kit and replace it as one. Okay, I'm going to install the ignition switch now. You see there's a dot. That's the bottom. You want to make sure that that's in that position with the cover opening that direction. If you install it that way without stopping and looking at it, you're taking a chance of shorting out your ignition switch. Okay, I'm going to mount this back into place. Get right back with you. Alright, I've got the ignition switch wired back into place. Now I'm going to go through wiring all my wiring back up. One thing I'm going to do is lay my diagram out here in front of me to make sure I'm putting all the wires in the correct position, connecting them to the connecting them to the correct terminal. I'll get back with you as soon as I get it all connected. Okay. Now that I have everything wired up, and I hope correct, before I connect the battery back, I'm going to stop and go through my wiring diagram again. And I'm making sure that I have my red and my green jumpers, which are necessary to run. As I said, the yellow is not necessary. That's depending on how you want to run your lights. Looks like I have everything correct. Let's get the battery back in and give it a test. Alright, I've got the ignition switch connected back to the bike. I've got the battery back in. I put the battery tender back in. If you don't have a battery tender, you may want to look to getting one. They're not that expensive. And the price of a battery tender versus buying a battery every year, I'd rather buy the battery tender, plug it in, keeps your battery charged up. You know, them nice winter days, when it gets nice enough to go for a ride, you can go out there, fire your bike up, take it for a ride, especially if you have a older bike or a carbureted bike or one that's cammed up pretty heavy. Knowing that that battery is going to fire up and let you go enjoy a nice winter ride is well worth the price of it. Well under 40 bucks. But anyway, got the new ignition switch on. Let me pull the enricher out and let's see what we got. That's how you put an ignition switch in a Softail. A little bit of afterthought here, and a little bit of reality. First off, make sure you have a good service manual. Any job you attempt, this makes it a lot easier. The instructions you have with the part that you buy may help, but usually they're pretty slim on details. Grab you a service manual. use the heck out of it. But a little bit of reality. I didn't show everything. Looking for wrenches that I set down where I didn't have them handy. Dropping nuts and bolts. Hunting for them, looking under the bike where they drop to. Good point is, I did not lose the pissy little screw that holds the mileage setter, or whatever you call it there, when you get gas, you know, to set your mileage to tell how much gas you burned, or, you know, when you need to fill up again. But I broke a wire while I was pulling off the old ignition switch. I had to run down to the hardware store and buy a new connector, rewire it in. When you're doing something like this, just be prepared. Things happen. I always tell my wife, I can always make a simple job last all day, and that happens. Don't get upset when it happens. Learn from it. Figure out how to fix it. You've learned something. See you down the road.